Hello, we're live here with FakeWhale and Stefano Contiero. Am I saying that right?
Yes. Hello.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for being here. So just for everybody at home, me and Stefano had a chance to connect a little bit in Venice just a few months ago during the Biennale. We were both part of the show at the Essential Art Pavilion. So we had a few run-ins, and I know that we both attended like the Vanity Fair, Meta Vanity,
Yeah.
presentation and stuff like that. So good to see you again, man. How are you?
I'm good. A bit tired. It's quite intense, the schedule lately. I'm actually getting ready to fly to LA tomorrow. So it's
That's right. Yeah,
busy.
we were trying to book this, and we were working around your schedule. Let's just jump right into it. What's bringing you to Los Angeles?
Just visit LA, catch up with a few people and the NFT scene there. I
Okay.
think there's quite a lot happening lately there. And yeah, also some friends. Then getting ready for NFT New York, which I will be attending to later the month before coming back to home here in Italy.
Okay, so you're spending some time in LA, and then you're going to New York after LA, and then back to Italy. That's great. You'll be like a month in America, huh?
Yeah, something like that.
Right on. Cool. Yeah, it does seem like there's a lot going on in LA lately. Just up the way from me here, Quantum LA, I know is doing things. Is that some of the people you're meeting, or?
Yeah, I think I will visit the quantum space. I know there's also Gen.art that's organizing with Cosimo de Medici and Punk 65.
Okay, right on.
An exhibition, and also Grailer's DAO, which I'm part of, will be having a little show there as well. So yeah.
What DAO is that?
Grailer's DAO.
Grailer's DAO, cool.
Yeah, generative art collector mainly.
And I know no, that was last night. Never mind. A peer of yours, a generative artist, gave a speech last night for they do a thing here in LA called NF Tuesdays, and she gave a presentation last night. But I was thinking that was next week and you'd be here for it, but never mind. So, anyways,
Who was
that's
it?
bringing you to LA. What was that?
Who was the artist that gave the presentation?
Let me look real quick. It was somebody who somebody had just commented today, because last night I had posted like who's some of your favorite generative artists, and somebody commented you and Alita Sun.
Oh yeah, yes, I
So
know
she
her.
gave a presentation last night, I guess, or maybe it's tomorrow night. Actually, it is tomorrow night. Yes, tomorrow night, NF Tuesday. Sorry, like many of us, the calendar is just my schedule is crazy as well. So I'm just going to dive into it. This is like the thing I wanted to talk to you about. Like I've been looking forward to this conversation because I don't know if I've ever spoken to anybody about generative art. Like the last interview I did or conversation with Kevin Abash, who does generative art, but I didn't ask him what generative art was. And so I'm going to ask you, Stefano, like what is generative art?
Well, I think it really depends how tight the definition you want, but pretty much, if you ask me, it's any kind of process that has some kind of autonomous decision-making process inside, meaning that there's some randomness that decide the actual art. It might be something decided with code, where you have some kind of random functions that decide the color, the shapes, and so on. But it might be something natural. It might be something that's completely physical, like if you throw a dice and every time the number 3 came up, you can take a turn right or left. Or it might be also like spiders are a good example of what can be generative art, because they're like, you can put a bunch of spider in a place and they will create some kind of nets and so on. And those are generative, and you can take decision based on those nets and have some art in it.
What would you consider if spiders are making it? So like this is really at like the heart of like really what I want to talk to you about, because I, in theory, understand what generative art is. Like to me, like what you just said, it makes sense and everything like that. But then when you bring in the natural world, when you bring in nature, you said like it doesn't have to be digital processes. Basically, it doesn't have. So basically, it doesn't have to be mathematical. Even, is that true?
Well,
Or
I
does
guess
it have to be mathematical?
It depends what we kind of mean with mathematical, because at the end of the day, everything is math. And if you ask me,
Yeah,
I'm actually a
just like
very
you
bad
can.
at math, and I pretty much don't understand anything. But
Yeah. So like just in the same way that you can break like so they say, like everything can be translated to data. Literally like everything, the wind could be translated to some sort
yes.
of data points. With like the example of spiders and stuff is super interesting to me. Like has there been artists who've done that, who have taken spiders and made generative art based on.
I think I not remember the name of the artist, but there was someone that created this kind of spider webs, and I'm not sure if it's the same project or two different projects, but for sure there was one exhibited in Venice Biennale a couple of years ago that was done with spiders, and I think there was another one who gave some kind of different drags to spiders,
Yeah.
see how the whole thing reacted to it. And I guess that can be called generative art.
Yeah. Yeah, I was, that's exactly what I was thinking of is that, I mean, it got turned into a meme where it was like, this is a spider on weed. This is a spider's web. It was a spider's web on weed, a spider's web on LSD, a spider's web on whatever else. Some cocaine, I think was one of them.
Mhm.
And like it dramatically changed the web in ways that you would almost expect. Like you could have been like, yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Like having taken these drugs, like I can understand why a spider would do that in comparison to how they would normally do it. So that, I mean, that's super, it's really fascinating. So this is such a deep, interesting topic. So it's not just, so like algorithms, how do they come into play with this? Like, would you say then that like almost everything can be broken down into an algorithm too? Or could you say that you could algorithmically say you could come up with an algorithm for the reasons the spiders do what they do? So like, yes, this is all algorithm based, just like it's data. Does that make any sense to you? Or like,
Yeah, I think so. If you ask me, I think pretty much everything in life can be broken down to an algorithm. And at the end of the day, an algorithm is just a set of rules and decisions.
yeah,
Let's say your morning routine. You wake up, open your eyes, wake up from the bed, wash your teeth, have breakfast, dress, and so on. That's just a set of rules. But what happens if the order is casual, or I don't know, every time there's is raining outside, you will do a different action. Like, for example, you will dress with something that's waterproof, and that's an algorithm at the end of the day. And if we apply that to creativity and art, it's not that different. You just take a bunch of rules, throw them together. The generative component is where randomness come into play, which pretty much is yeah a function that returns to you usually a number between 0 and 1, and based on that value you decide to do one instruction or the other. So let's say the most basic generative algorithm could be like the background color of a canvas. If we map 0 to 1 to different colors, whatever the results will determine the output and the background of the whole thing.
okay. I feel slow because I slowly understand, and like I'm understanding what you're saying here. I am, trust me, even if it doesn't seem like I am. It's just like hard to come up with the questions that I'm coming up with, or like thinking of like, so are you guiding this process, would you say at all? Like in what ways are you guiding that process?
Mhm.
To what level are you having control, and are those controls before or after the process? Do you know what I mean? Like, so
Yes.
before the process, you set up the guidelines. So maybe that could be considered like your process of creating art would be to set up the guidelines that this will work within, which is very important. At the end of the process, is there another decision-making process involved in that? So like what I'm wondering, I guess, okay, let me break that into two questions. what are the inputs? What do you have control over going into it? What decision making, or like, because to me, okay, I'm even going to break this down further. Like, what makes this art? Do you know what I mean? Like because to me, art has like, so there's intentionality behind art, right? There's motivation and everything, and all that matters. Like, and when I talk with other artists, a lot of times, even for studio artists, it's a lot about like, like the process is a lot more important than that final piece type thing, or, and like talking about an artist studio practice is really interesting to me. And that's really what I thought a lot about leading up to this conversation with you of like, okay, a generative artist, what is generative art? I'm gonna not even think about that, but I'm more like, what is the art of generative art? Like, what is, like, so like, what is your process, I guess, leading up to it? And like, then how do you implement those controls over the work so that this is your art? That's a lot, but do you know what I mean?
No, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine that happens to be an artist a couple of weeks ago about this specific topic. And for me personally, generative art is just a mean to kind of deliver the art. And where the art happens is kind of in the process, meaning that usually when I start creating a piece, I have some very loose vision that I want to create. With vision, I mean literally like dreaming or imagining the visual output of the piece. And I sit down and I start writing code pretty much, trying to replicate that vision and bring that vision alive. But of course, given that just a vision, it's fuzzy, blurry, and so on. So there's this kind of feedback loop between myself, my taste, my subconscious, and what I'm writing and what the machine is kind of spitting back at me.
In just 1 second, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to clarify, when you say vision and you said like literal vision, you have like an aesthetic, a visual in mind that you want this to look
Yes.
like. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Most of the time that happens kind of randomly and suddenly, like when I'm waking up, when I'm falling asleep, or I see something that catch my eye and then literally imagine and see things. Probably is the easiest way to describe it. And I'm like, okay, I can try to do that with code, or but I could even try to do that with like paint or whatever, or a pen. It's just that
I think that's why it blew my mind, because I think normally if somebody had a visual in mind, they wouldn't think like, let me figure out how to code that. I wouldn't even have a fucking clue, So that's brilliant. I mean, it's super interesting. But yes, carry on, please.
No, yeah, and I think that what you just said literally gives the answer away. It's not that easy and straightforward to take something you see and put it into code, and that's what I like the most, because trying to do that, I forced myself kind of out of the vision and inside more like this creative loop between coding and the actual randomness that plays a big part and gives me an unexpected result that kind of drives me toward one direction or another. And at the end of the day, it's pretty much a decision making exercise where you decide every single aspect of the whole piece, especially because so pretty much what happened is I write the different rules to generate the piece. I run the code, I have an output, and I say, okay, I like this, I don't like that. And I kind of iterate over and over and again until I'm happy with the result. And I'm like, okay, I finally like this. And this is kind of the first part of the process. The second part is, again, probably harder than the first, because the first is very playful, very trial and error, and kind of it might sound kind of extreme and the opposite of what generative art might be, but to me it's very unlogical, very emotional, and I don't think that much about uh, the logical part of the whole thing. But sometimes, like with code and with math, you need to be logical, but I don't like in the first part of the process that I just go with the flow, and whatever happens and I'm happy with it, I just take it and try to maximize it. But once, let's say, the algorithm is done, usually what I do is generating 100 or thousands of outputs. And this is where the second part of the job comes into place, which is curating and selecting the ones that I like the most. And it's kind of a very hard process where you sit here in front of 1,000 outputs and spend hours trying to compare the two and say, I like this most, no, I like that one, and try to kind of find the one that speaks the most to you. And so decisions again. And what I usually do after that is also sit down with the end result and understand why I had the vision in the first place. And that's probably a question that has been driving me a little bit crazy lately. And I know kind of the answer for myself, but I'm also curious to hear your opinion. So when I create art, usually it doesn't start from a need to communicate something. It starts from a need to express something, meaning that I wake up and I do something, and then I want to understand and figure out what I wanted to kind of express and communicate without kind of knowing it. I'm not sure if it makes sense. And speaking with other artists, I figured out that a lot of time the process is the opposite, where they want to communicate something and try to work their way to communicate that with art, with visuals or their media. And for me, it's kind of the opposite. So the whole process ends with myself asking me, okay, what does this mean to me? And what's the hidden message my subconscious, my vision were trying to kind of bring to the world?
So you have the vision first and and then like try to understand why the vision exists. It's not like I need to express something. It's that you express something and then figure out why you need to express it.
Yes.
I mean, I love that, but yeah, I guess I don't know. It's difficult because it gets into language a little bit with me, where it's like, what's the difference between communicating and expressing? Because those two things to me are the same, that an expression is communication, be it nonverbal maybe or not. But um, to me, expression can just be expression too, or yeah, I guess I do come from I have something that I need to get out kind of, or I'm like, blah, I'm kind of like vomiting something out. And then when it's done, I look at it and then I'm just glad it's over, and I guess for you, you have a contemplative time afterwards of curiosity of yourself almost, which
Mhm.
is super cool of like, you're, you're like discovering yourself through working. And I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah, I think, yeah, it does put you in a different place as an artist. And I would also almost journey to maybe hypothesize why that is. And could to me be like the medium itself, where it's like the medium that you choose to work in is conducive to that. And I'm not saying that the work came first, but your way of learning about yourself is maybe what drove you to, the form of working that suits you to doing that, or something. Whereas a medium like painting, or a medium like really any hands-on medium where you're working with your material and stuff, it's a very immediate process. You know what I mean? Like, you're direct with it and everything like that. And it kind of, you have to be in the moment with it, where it's like, if you are just painting and you're just like blah, and you don't know why or what you're trying to express, you're not going to get the expression. So like, if I'm trying to express anger, I feel anger and I
Yeah.
fucking am angry, and it's like, boom, I know what the fuck that is. It's right there. But for you, it's like this whole other process. And I think that's really cool. And also too, I will bring this a little too into the Web3 and NFT thing of like, that's why it's cool. Like, this conversation between you and I probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for us both being within this community,
Yeah.
because we wouldn't collide normally. But now we've shown together probably multiple times. And I think that's really cool. That's a side note. I want to continue down this path and everything, because it's super interesting. What we're talking about here. I wrote down the word unexpected because I want to understand I gotta figure out how to phrase this too, because it's like your results are unexpected at the end, yes, but to what extent are they unexpected?
Mhm. So it's a hard question to answer, meaning that, of course, I have kind of an idea of what the outputs will be. I have, the more I know the algorithm, the more kind of it's hard for myself to be surprised with the output. But on the end of the day, there might be something I didn't see, like a bug, for example. And sometimes the bugs are the most interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, I was not expecting that. Why it's kind of going crazy suddenly. But I think in the past, the easiest way I had to describe this kind of with human life or life in general, where if you think about humans, every human is kind of relatable to each other. We are all similar. We have two eyes, a nose, ears, and so on, but we are all different. And with algorithmic art and generative art, it's very similar. You have the algorithm that's kind of the blueprint for life. So it will generate a human, but you do not know like exactly the eye color, if it will be tall or short, and so on. So it's like sometimes people are incredibly beautiful, sometimes they're a little bit less beautiful.
Well, it's like you know the species that you're gonna get, but you don't know, you know, like everything within that
Yeah.
species, you know, all the variables. Yeah, that it makes sense. I like what you said about bugs too. You know, like being the most interesting part, because it's that kind of touches this question, and I don't even know how to say this, but like when I'm paint, I don't paint traditionally like a canvas and paintbrush and stand there and make a painting or whatever. I throw stuff on things and spray it with water, and I, you know, fuck around and shit like that. And so in my mind, it's more of a generative process than it is like I'm trying to like get this thing. But it's like, okay, I know that if I use this kind of ink and it's at this viscosity, and then I use this spray bottle, it sprays like this on this medium, which does this. Like I know, okay, now I'm starting to have parameters where it's like I know the species of the thing I'm going to do too. But in the end, what I'm trying to capture is something that I'm not able to like. It's almost like I'm trying to figure out the algorithm of just like what's the algorithm that governs ink with water on plastic,
Yeah.
you know, and like, and what does that look like then? And so um I don't know if like how far you could bring the term generative art, but you know, you could be like, this is my version of generative art, you know, where I'm using, but when you brought up the spiders thing, that's what came to mind too, you know. But even further than that, it's like I just had like a perfect example in mind and I lost it, of course, but yeah, anyways, how far can you bring that term generative art, would you say? Like,
I think it really depends what you want to convey and what you want to kind of identify yourself with at the end of the day. Because if you ask me, generative art is very loose and very big, and it's pretty much anything that includes entropy and randomness in it. But especially nowadays, we are seeing a lot of people that identify as a generative artist that are more into kind of coding and literally focus more kind of the set of instructions and the algorithmic part. Like I think what I like the most about generative art in the way I create generative art and this new way of let's say NFTs and generative art is that it kind of is it sits on two opposite sides. The first one is the whole randomness and unpredictability, but on the other hand, you have the predictability and the kind of the reproducibility of the final piece. It's kind of like the DNA, going back again to the blueprint for life. Once you have that DNA, you will be 100% sure that you will have that kind of person or output in the end of the when after the algorithm is executed. Meanwhile, in a scenario where you were kind of describing, where you're just trying to figure out the algorithmic or kind of the parameters for a physical piece, where you throw paints and so on, it's very hard to reproduce that once you have done the first time, because there's kind of this you get it once right, but the second time, even if you do 100% the same thing, it's very, very hard to have the same output. Meanwhile, with machines, usually once you have reproduced the perfect kind of parameters, you will always get that kind of output. And
you're hitting a nail on the head right there of like something I think I wanted to say earlier, where it was like, yeah, the difference being that you can reproduce it, and where it's like, if you are you got a spray bottle, ink, and plastic, my example, and you do something great the one time, if you try to do it again, which I've fucking done, and that's why like I've done hundreds probably, like try to get one more, it's like, it feels generative because you're like fucking just going,
yes.
So I have hundreds as well. So anyways, carry on, please. But
yeah, and going back to NFTs, like having the possibility to take this unpredictable output and freezing it in time and having it persistent forever in the blockchain, it's kind of a perfect match made in heaven, because you have the kind of ephemeral part that generative art has. Like if you do not save that output, if you generate the algorithm once again with a different seed, like that's lost forever. You won't be able to get that again, because there are so many tiny little choices that influence the output. But if you save that seed, the simple fact of saving that together with the algorithm, you will always have the same output. And you kind of if we want to take it like on a big metaphorical journey, it's like you're saving or creating a life and like giving a life to the art and preserving it through history.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is such a topic that probably is so like foreign to so many people. So like I'm trying to like go slow and like not overwhelm myself either, but like everything you say, it's like I feel like I need like 5 minutes just sit and then think for a while or whatever. But like I've been writing down things as they come up that I'm thinking about a lot, because I feel like as much as people think of generative art as being like this some really detached, maybe even cold or like foreign thing, a lot of the way that you're talking about it and the way that I think I would prefer to think about it, and maybe I won't even phrase this as a statement, but I'll ask you the question, like, do you consider this nature? Is this nature? Do you consider these natural processes? You're using words like entropy, randomness, like these are natural processes. And I mean this in a literal way, like we're nature, it's human beings, right? We are, and we created everything that we have that's not nature, including computer and data and stuff like that, are all creations of human beings. And to me, I don't believe there is anything that's not nature, because we exist. Everything, all the materials, like this all existed here. We didn't fucking magically make anything out of nothing, like. So to me, even the internet and the way that data works is somewhat natural. So to me, I'm wondering if this really is the version of like a spray bottle on a piece of plastic with some mud or something, only in a digital sense. And let me bring it back to the question that I'm posing you: is this nature?
Probably yes, probably not, meaning that that's probably a question that's literally bugging me every day. What I'm trying to do humanize machines, but we can take humanize out of the question and just bring nature in. If we think about computers, if we think about technology, most of the time it's kind of, as you described it, very cold, very perfect, very like it's supposed to be emotionless and just work. Meanwhile, what I'm trying to do through generative art, code, and technology is research that kind of more emotional and pure expression that nature can have over technology. meaning that in a very practical way, what I try to convey with my art, with my generative algorithms is that I want a person who does know nothing about generative art or myself or my process just to take a look at the output and wonder how it was made. Because in a perfect world, they would not be able to even think about a computer, just say, okay, this is a very nice painting, or just trying to figure out and understand what was the kind of the technique. Is it a photography? Is it an illustration or whatever? And taking it like one step farther, I even prefer kind of merging the two worlds, where I have like the perfection you can achieve with technology, but with a soul and a human feeling, meaning that if I create something that seems impossible to create with Photoshop, because you would spend probably 1,000 years, but also impossible to create with like manual hand, because it would probably take many lifetimes, and combine it together in a single work. That's kind of my grade of what I want to do, and what I want to really achieve, putting people in front of a piece of work and trying to understand and puzzle themselves. Is this created by a machine? Is it created by a human? How it was made? And one thing that probably kind of the segue to this kind of thing is that most of the time I really like to see my pieces printed in a physical setting and scenario, because I feel that brings more kind of life in the piece itself, but also is more natural to kind of close the loop, because having like kind of seeing light reflected back at you and not coming from a screen give a different perspective and depth to the work, and making it even more natural and human.
I love that. Like I find it so interesting, like to be speaking with more and more digital artists that, and like you said, like I find it fascinating actually that so many are, when the process starts on a computer, and like it's mostly done on a computer, they're so interested in like printing, and then also like they love galleries, they love the physicality of everything.
Yes.
They want to. And then for me, I've been working with galleries for a while, you know, and like I'm very physical, I'm very digital and back and forth or whatever, but there's a lot of physicality in my work, and now I'm coming to the point of like, okay, I'm done with the physical, like I want to see my work on screens and stuff. So like, and I love that you brought up the light reflection thing, because it's such a great insight on your end of like, you're used to seeing your images with light coming through them, and a print is light being reflected at you. And I think about this all the time, because even if you work in a studio, you'll see, you know, the difference the lighting makes during the day versus when you have to use artificial light at night, and the way that that changes your piece. And for me, bringing my work then on a screen, I do think about, okay, now light's shining through it, and I love that. But it's also really funny, because for me, I edit all of my stuff for both print and digital, because it's exactly what you said. It's light going through versus reflecting light, and those sometimes can require different things. So it's so interesting, these intersections that are happening, me being such like even a physical artist, and then you or whatever, but having like these similar ideas behind the work, even similarities in process, which is just fascinating, that people probably would never put together, that somebody like a studio artist, painter, there's so many similarities. I
Yes.
think all artists in general are interested in kind of natural processes for one, and then also this kind of like understanding of human nature, through like understanding of self and stuff like that. It's all super fascinating. I'm gonna ask about cymatics. Are you interested in cymatics at all?
In what?
Cymatics, I believe it's pronounced cymatics. It's
Uh,
Cymatics.
oh, okay. Yes, I've heard about it. I've never kind of done.
Okay, well, the reason, so I'm really into music and sound in general, and the reason I bring this up is because cymatics is a study of the visualization of like sound, but like physically. So like
Mhm.
they do these, I think the book I have is using either glass or some sort of plate with a speaker underneath it, and then different frequencies, and then the sand on top of it, there's sand on top, forms into these
Yeah.
patterns, these visual, beautiful patterns. And it's reproducible, that the different hertz and the different frequencies that you put through the speakers, And every time we'll produce these different shapes, and much like the spiders on LSD, the different kinds of music, there will be harsh edges, it will be circular, it will be all these different things. That's generative as fuck, right?
Yes. Yeah, I
And
think
that
it's probably the closest natural thing you can think of that's generative art. Like frequencies are the perfect example, like sounds, but also wave reflection and light. And that's, yeah.
because it's just data points, right? It's all, and then the variables, like what you're saying, like the algorithm would be like turning the knob,
Yeah,
right?
those are the parameters. The algorithm is pretty much vibration and nature and the laws of the universe, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Wow. I love it. Yeah, this is so cool. So a couple dumb questions maybe. This is like completely ignorant, and I'm just about like the process, the actual process. Like, how many like variables at the beginning are we talking about here?
it depends from algorithm to algorithm. There might be kind of a few variables. There might be thousands of it.
Thousands.
It really depends, like
Okay.
what you're trying to achieve, and probably how much variability you want to give to the final outputs. Because usually, I think it's not the number of variables, but it's the number of choices that might be more significant for the actual process, but also when you take the choice. Because the earlier you take the choice, the more different the output will be. Let's think about like background again. If you decide, like the very first thing you decide, and I think most of my algorithm, the first time, the thing that they decide is the color palette, and the second one is the background color.
But
But
even within the color palette, how many choices are within that? Like how many
um,
variables?
I guess it depends how many you
Yeah,
want.
okay.
You can pretty much
Just as
have
many as you want. Yeah, okay.
infinite color palettes. You can have programmatic color palettes, which means
Okay.
you can just code and try to generate your
Okay.
color palettes.
So I'm
Or you,
sorry to cut you off. It's just like, yeah, it's like getting to the thing that I always talk about when I'm faced with digital is that you're faced with infinity. Like there is no, you really have to impose your own limitations, where at least when you're working in the physical world, there's physical limitations, but when you get to digital, it's like you're not. So instead of, I guess, asking you these generalized questions, let's talk specifically about your work at this point. um, when you're working, like, let's talk about that process of like creating, you have the vision, you wake up in the morning, boom, I want to make something that blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about the beginning of your process. Can you just walk me through that a little bit? Like,
yeah.
how do you start? Yeah, great.
Usually I just open a code editor. I have, let's say, a boilerplate, which is probably the same as preparing your own canvas and brushes. And then I try to break down my vision and try to replicate that vision through shapes, lines, points, and so on, and instruction. It's pretty simple. It's literally, if we take a painting as a reference, so you have the brush and you start from point 1 to point 2, and you just move the brushes in that direction, and pretty much you tell the computer to do the same. And where randomness comes into play is like you do not start from a fixed point and end to a fixed point, but you say introduce some kind of shift, some kind of randomness in the position, and so on. And then usually through replication and keep a different adding instructions, you get closer and closer to what you were thinking of in the beginning. And for myself, it's like I think the vision is always into play, but it's not there anymore as like focused and detailed as it was in the beginning, because it starts from a very blurry and fuzzy place, but it almost fades out before getting like kind of finalized and refined. And that's probably one of the aspects I like the most, with just sitting there and trying to replicate something I had in mind. But as soon as I kind of get into the flows, I forget about it, and I just literally see where the randomness and my taste and my mood are taking me. And then yeah, I think usually it's very unpredictable, because it might last 10 minutes and I'm done. It might take 10 days, or it might be something I never complete. Just leave it there, and maybe one day I will revisit it. And then once, let's say, I'm to a point where I kind of feel comfortable to say, okay, this is going somewhere, I start to kind of break down the single pieces of the algorithm and find the one that I think might be the more interesting ones. So I take, let's say, there's an instruction that decide how much chaos there is in it. So usually my thoughts are, okay, what happens if I remove completely the cows? Or what happens if I take the cows to the maximum, or even more, and see and say, okay, I like this more, or I like this not so much. And it's very kind of a dialogue within my taste, myself, what I feel, and what the randomness in the computer gave to me to play with. And then after this phase where I try to maximize what I like and what I think is right and minimize what I don't, I just refine until to a point. Usually my trigger to say, okay, I need to step back and I'm kind of done with this, is the amount of time I spend refreshing, and I want to see what's next. When I get stuck and I'm half an hour, I'm just hitting the refresh button and seeing new outputs, like, okay, I'm done here. I need to kind of pause, because otherwise I will just get sucked into this tunnel vision where I just keep refreshing the page. And usually there I just leave the computer generate a huge number of images, which then later I will kind of enjoy and take time to go through and select.
I love that you're talking about this process of you begin something and then you let randomness take over, basically, yes. And then you refine from there, because that's the process of me. That's the process of a lot of my peers, that are studio artists, that talking about this necessity for randomness, at trying to create randomness in the studio. A lot of times as a physical artist, you'll try destroying things or breaking things to create randomness. And when you talk about your process, it sounds so similar. And I wasn't expecting that. I really wasn't. And I love hearing about it, because it really is. It's like, okay, I kind of have an idea. Let me put up the parameters and then let randomness take over. And then you see kind of like one thing happen that you could have never expected or have planned for. But that's it. That's the thing you wanted, but you couldn't have made it, And then from there, what I've always called it is like you pull on the thread, you finally got the thread, and then you start pulling on it. And that's exactly what you're talking about. You start then refining that and going down that path. Mm-hmm. That's like the true art path, I think. It's like going with that flow and hearing that's the same with generative art. Is such a, I don't know, it makes my day. It really does. It's like so beautiful to me. So yeah, I want to bring it to a personal level. Like what brought you to doing generative art? I just glanced at like your overview and saw that your first mint was March of 2021. Is that right?
Yes.
That's not even that long ago, I mean, it is. It's 1,000 years, and it's also 1 year. But in my, what brought you there? What brought you to generative art? Were you doing generative art before NFTs? I'm guessing yes. But I don't want to guess too much, but like, what background brings you to generative art? Were you a programmer, or do you have visual art background, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So going quite back in time, when I was a very little kid, I was fascinated by technology, and it was almost like a second nature to me, to the point where my parents were like, hey, Stefano, too much computer, let's just take a break. I think I was pretty much spending my days with Microsoft Paint, just drawing stuff, filling shapes, and having fun with that. So my mom was like cutting me off and like locking myself out of the computer after a couple of hours. And like, I want more. So what
Yeah.
happened was that I discovered how to freeze the UI. So with very basic scripts. So I was 8 years old and I started like coding this, like pretty much screens of that on Windows, where I was opening thousands of windows. Hey mom, the computer crashed. Can you please put the password for me? And I was trying to kind of spy the password to fill in. But that wasn't very effective. So I said, okay, instead of uh, pretty
Trying to
much
hack your
freezing the
mom.
computer, and I tried to replicate the login with my skills. So I kind of faked the UI and tricked my mind to putting the password in the UI. So I pretty much fished my mom to have the password.
God
And
damn.
after that, they were like, okay, Stefano, whatever, do what you want with the computer. And
How
so
old were you? 8?
8. So yeah, fast forward, pretty much, it was clear to me that I wanted to work with computer, and I learned how to program. I went to school, and pretty much I became a software developer. Then I was kind of building a career out of that, but I was also interested into like design and visual and how things worked. So I shifted more to a kind of design career. And I think my first love was coding, but it was missing something. And design, it's still very kind of uh, like logical, and it has more emotion in it, but it's missing kind of the coding aspect. And I think it was 2018, and I was a bit frustrated with work because I was kind of hating being a software developer because of the constraints of the clients and so on. And I fell out of love with coding. And one morning, for some reason, I say, "Okay, let's learn generative art." I bought myself a book, and that was it. Pretty much started reading the book, and after I think 1 week, I was like staying up all night just coding and generative art. And that yeah, I spent pretty much from 2018 to 2021 just creating art for myself, interacting a bit with the community, but I'm more on the shy end of be like very introvert and don't like, I'm not a huge internet persona. So it was like something I did for myself, and maybe like my closest friends knew about it, but I wasn't very vocal about it. And then pandemic arrived. I just moved to Berlin from Italy. I was like ready to start a new life in a new city, new country, new work, new office. Super excited about it. And after a month and a half, I was stuck in my apartment without
And this is
knowing.
Berlin.
Yes. And pretty much doing what I was doing before on a screen without like having people around me. And that kind of pulled me back into art, like very much. And toward the end of 2020, I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. And it was like this kind of click inside my mind. I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm an artist. That's what I identify myself with. I think I've struggled for many years, pretty much all my life, to understand, to put myself a label. And of course, you do not need to, but it's easier for yourself, especially to say, okay, I'm comfortable being this kind of thing. And when I finally understood that like artist is my label, I'm like, oh, okay, like a whole new world opened for me. And after that, I was kind of feeling a bit stuck in that life, kind of 9 to 5 job and so on. Of course, everything was kind of perfect if I think about it, but I was not happy because it was not like my vocation, my passion. And I decided, okay, I just will build a website and be an artist and present myself as an artist. And fast forward, NFTs arised and the world blew in my face, and now we are here, pretty much.
I mean, that like really cool story. Like the part about identifying as an artist, I know like every artist goes through that period of like, I can't call myself that. I wouldn't allow myself to call myself an artist for the longest time, even though I was like, even when I had made a career out of being an artist, I still wasn't comfortable with the term. It's all, you know, very personal. so like the minting part, like in the NFTs, what was the introduction to NFTs for you? Like,
Mhm.
I'm guessing it was because if you'd already started interacting with the generative community around 2018, 2019, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you probably knew about NFTs earlier than a lot of people.
Uh, yes, I think so. I'm not sure. Let's say what really made it for me and what really made me look into NFTs was Artblocks. Because I feel as a generative artist, I struggled a lot with sharing my work, not only because it's very personal, but also because it's like, again, the curation part we were discussing earlier is very hard, very emotional, and also very difficult to kind of give to people because if I have this algorithm that potentially can generate infinite outputs, how am I supposed to pick one or 10
Hmm.
kind of make people
Well, and
understand?
how also, yeah, and how also do you communicate value to somebody about that? If you're like, yeah, I can generate 1,000, or I made 1,000,000 of these, and here's one, you know?
Exactly. And then Artblocks arrived, and there was Dmitry Serniak with Ringers, and it kind of
Can I just
spread.
stop you real 1 second? Can you just say what Artblocks is real quick for anybody who might
Yeah,
not
sure.
know what
It's
Artblocks is? I mean, me being one of them, I'm not super familiar with Artblocks because I'm
no
not a
worries.
generative artist. So
So Artblocks is an NFT platform that's pretty much for generative art, and I think
solely, right? Only generative art on Artblocks.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
because the actual minting process and everything is a bit different from Super Rare or any other platform. I think FX Hash for Tezos is pretty much the
Yep.
equivalent.
I was going to bring up FX hash because that's generative on Tezos, though, right?
Yes,
And that's all generative as well.
yeah.
Okay.
Because in a nutshell, how does those work? You take your algorithm and you upload directly the algorithm to the blockchain, and pretty
Wow.
much people go there, press a button, and a mint will come up. And the beautiful thing about this process is that for us generative artists, we are no longer forced to curate and select our outputs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like we trust the algorithm. We do not know what will happen. But when a person press that button, they will have a unique, forever storing the blockchain work that nobody would have expected or figured out because the act of generating the piece happens live when they minting.
Hmm. Which is so cool. When
Yeah,
did
and,
Artblocks start?
I think they started around end of 2020. I don't recall the
Okay.
exact moment, but if I recall correctly, the project ringers that kind of catch the attention of pretty much every generative artist was around the end of January or February
Okay.
last year. And yeah, as soon as I think pretty much all the generative artists I know saw that happen, it was like I don't know, Christmas, because finally there's a way to take art and give it to people, getting paid for it. But most of like the most important thing was that we were able to deliver straight the algorithm without worrying about curating and being in between the algorithm and people.
Yeah. That's crazy. I didn't know that. I didn't know how that worked. I didn't know that you uploaded the algorithm and then, I mean, but it makes sense. I get it. Um, let's distinguish real quick, I guess, between, because people use this process for their PFP projects,
Mhm.
and you don't do that. Like what you're doing is very different than your PFP project. So, but they're using that same kind of idea, right? Where it's like a set of variables and then it randomizes, and when you mint. So when people are doing the PFP projects, are they uploading an algorithm too, or
Well,
uploading?
it depends. I guess you can do that. I know
Or I
that.
guess you can algorithmically generate them and upload them as, okay. Interesting. I see. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you uploaded the algorithm. That's super interesting. And you brought up art blocks and like that, the Rainers, and who did the Rainers? Dmitry Cherniak.
Mhm.
And okay, so this is something I wanted to touch on you with as well. This is a little kind of a veer off of the topic right now, but value, like, how is it that, because some of these projects are generating just ridiculous amounts of fucking money, and
Yes.
I don't pay that much attention to the money or the market or whatever, But what I am curious in is like value and like how value is assigned to things. And in this instance, if you are creating 1,000 at a time, if you're creating 2,000 at a time, three, whatever the amount is, and then also to this whole minting thing where you're just uploading the algorithm, and I don't mean to say just, I apologize, but like when you're uploading the algorithm, yeah. So like, how is the value being determined? And so like, I kind of already know an answer because value is always determined almost by rarity, right? But how is that rarity being considered or generated, or do you understand my question here?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't have an answer for you, meaning that yes, rarity, like if we take it from a very unemotional aspect and mathematical and statistical aspect, yes, rarity defines pretty much the value. The more rare a piece in the set, the higher the value, I suppose. But for me personally, the values lie somewhere else. It's more like the connection you get to a piece, and there might be a piece that speaks to you more than another. Sometimes also that happens with rarity, but because that piece stands out a bit more, or we generative artists tries to make more like the rarer pieces more beautiful. Uh, but I think it's very entropic as well. It happens sometimes. The right person finds the right project and the right mint, and it will be extremely rare. Some other times, it's actually the algorithm. If we think another project, Fidenza by Tyler Hobbs, which is probably the biggest generative artist nowadays. There are a couple. I think one is the God High and the Tulips, where the output is so different from the rest of the set, which is almost magical and divine that the output is like that. Because you could generate probably, I don't know, millions of generation, but you would not get even one that's close to that one. And so it's very entropic and very casual. If we want to go like more metaphysical, it's more like the universe decided that that specific piece is important. If we like say from more like a financial and collector perspective, of course, it's probably less emotional and more like data driven. But if you ask me, probably rarity doesn't make a lot of sense in generative art, because especially like induced rarity or rarity that's there for the sake of being there, because it kind of goes against the nature of generative art, where you should not worry about making something more rare or more common, because the entropy and the universe will already do that for you.
Yeah, that's super interesting. When I love what you're saying about the like the divinity, that you use that word, it's great. I mean, but that like I totally understand, like you could do this process 1,000 times and it maybe would do that one more time, you know, like, but it's such so like that rarity, which is not induced rarity, like you said, I can which is, I guess you could call it false rarity or something like that, where you're like manufacturing rarity. So like that sense of rarity through nature, as you know, makes total sense to me. I'm curious, like how many pieces get minted, or like on a project, like I don't even know, like how many ringers are there?
I think ringers should be around 700, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so there's not that many. That, I mean, 700 in the grand scheme of things isn't that many. So there is rarity in that way. And I mean, this might be really ignorant too, but I almost like relate, like when you were just talking about that process, I almost related it to like Bitcoin mining, or like mining for Ethereum or whatever, where it's running algorithms and it will do that a million times and it might shoot out one coin or whatever it does, you know, like I don't know about that process either, but I know it shoots out, like it's running algorithms and it shoots something out every once in a while. And that's kind of like the same idea as like you might get this one, it turned out this way for whatever reason out of all these. It's so like I'm thinking in that way, and in that way, if you value the tokens themselves, you could even think in token value of like, you're generating this many tokens and only this one looks like this, and etc. So like, I understand some of that. I mean, how many Fidenzas are there? Do you know?
Should be 999.
Is that kind of around when these kind of projects drop? Do you have a project that would be like a Rainer or a Fidenza? Do you have like your namesake kind of thing?
Well, usually I always try to name my projects in Italian.
Okay.
And so my 4 projects that use Artblocks technology are Frammenti, which means fragments, Rinascita, which means reborn, rebirth. And then there's Saturazione, which means saturation, and Legenda, which is legend. And
Awesome.
so I think like the numbers of outputs and the size of algorithms and so on also depends on the algorithm, but it's definitely something hard for us for generative artists to kind of choose and pick, because you want to have like a sweet spot where you have enough variability that showcase the full algorithm, but it doesn't get too boring. And I guess nowadays it's shifting a bit, because last year was very hyped and we were kind of forced to have larger mean size to accommodate like all the demand there was from collectors. And now instead it's like things are getting a little bit more calm, and so we will be seeing less and less or smaller generative mint numbers and so on.
Right on. I mean, this is all really awesome information. I've learned a lot. I want to just switch gears just a little bit, if that's okay. I mean,
Yeah,
unless there's more, like, is there something about generative art that we didn't touch on or that I'm missing that you want people to know? I was trying to come at this interview or this conversation from a place of somewhat ignorance, where it's like I kind of know what generative art is, but I really don't, and I don't understand a lot about it. And so it was kind of selfish in the way of like, okay, I'm going to learn and ask the questions that I want to know about. But as a generative artist, I could also understand, like, because this is such a misunderstood form of art. Like, I would say that like fucking 90% of the world, you would say generative art and they wouldn't have a fucking clue what you meant by that, you know? And so like, don't totally understand if there's something that I completely miss because I don't live it. What, like, is there something that you want the world to know about generative art that they're just missing, or no?
Yeah, well, I think not something specific, but something that comes to my mind is that pretty much generative art can be for everybody. It's not hard to get started with generative art. Actually, it's super easy. Probably like if we take a step back from generative art and we think about coding, coding is often perceived as something hard to understand, hard to learn, hard to kind of start getting started with. But it's true to a certain extent, because there are many great ways to learn how to code. And nowadays, it's usually just opening up your web browser and find a tutorial and going step by step. And I want people to understand that generative art actually, it's coding, but it's probably the easiest way to learn coding. There's like literally tons of great material processing, Foundation, which has processing, but which is a IDE for creative coding, but also P5.js, which is the counterpart for the web browsers. They have many great resources, tutorials. There are many people that kind of outsource and open source their knowledge. And there's no right or wrong answer in generative art. There's no concept such as bug. Often the bug is the most interesting part. So don't get scared by it. It's literally just a matter of opening a book, as I did. Okay, I had like the whole background to understand and pick up it very quickly. But it's something that's easy to experiment, probably easier than learning how to paint.
You're probably fucking right. Maybe not for me though, because you're talking about how easy it is, like coding, and you just have to like read some things and it's like just that. I'm like, I don't, fuck it, I can't do that. A coding, but no, oh man, I was gonna, I had something, fuck, and then you threw me off like saying that about the painting. But I was gonna ask like what if somebody was interested and you're saying how easy it is, like just give us first step, where would you go? What would, like, if you want to, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. What website do I go to? What do I look up? What do I
Yeah, I
Google
think
or whatever?
P5.js is the place to start nowadays.
Could you say that again?
P5.js.
P5.js. And I'm asking for myself even because you're saying it's easy and stuff like that. So I'm going to look into it a little bit. P5.js. And what is that?
It's the library, the processing version for the web, which is basically you just throw the library. They have an open editor where you can experiment, and they have like great examples.
Oh.
But then there's like, I think the coding train as well. It's a YouTube channel from Daniel Schiffman that pretty much breaks down every math or every kind of algorithm you can think of and walks you through all the different steps and helps you replicate it. But there are tons of great material out there, and it's very, very easy to start. And I think another common misconception is that you need to be good at math and understand math to do interesting stuff. And that's kind of true if you want to have control. If you're willing to give up control and just there's like math, it's like good to have, but not needed. And that's a perfect example because I'm very bad at math. And sometimes I spend hours because I want to do something in that way, but it's definitely not a necessity to kind of create interesting art.
That's fucking fascinating. You're bad at math, huh? You're not a math person. I would have never expected that. Yeah, you're like really breaking a lot of misconceptions with this interview. I'm really happy that you're doing that. But this is actually a perfect transition to some of these final things I just want to ask you, because we're talking about this is for everybody. This is just another form of art. Like, it sounds to me, you know, even though you were like a software developer and stuff, so obviously, you know, you're more geared towards that, but you're more of an artist, you know, as much as like, you know, you are anything else. So I like studio practice. So like for you, studio practice is sitting with the computer. Do you listen to music when you're working?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? What kind of music do you listen to?
Hard question to answer. I'm mostly an electronic music nerd. So like depends, can be pretty much everything on the spectrum of electronic music, like very dark techno to very mellow hyper pop and things like that.
Of course, that makes sense, you know. Just like the rhythmic, like I find that when I'm trying to do work where I'm not trying to problem solve, I guess, that much, where it's more like this other kind of more automatic work when I'm working, I'm really, you know, in it and stuff, that rhythmic, because I listen to a lot of electronic music as well, but like there's something about when I put on the electronic music, the rhythm, the rhythmic nature of it, I forget that it's even on. I'm just like in it. Do you know what I mean? Do you get that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably the easiest way I also have to get started, but also the biggest influence in my art, because again, I don't have like an artistic background. I of course have like kind of the general culture knowledge of Picasso, Monet, and so on, but I don't get as many references as probably other artists do from other artists. But music instead, it's a huge source of inspiration for me because. Especially, I would say what I do with generative art is trying to make works that are texture layered and very kind of organic and detailed. And with music, you get that, especially with kind of some more noisy electronic music where you have these layers building on top, like this grit and this texture to the sound that kind of I think I would say subconsciously inspired me to replicate the same, because most of the time there's absolutely no relation to the piece and to the music I'm listening to, but still kind of is in the back of my mind to kind of have that complexity and that layering in my art.
Absolutely. Like that layering in electronic music is so inspiring to me too. Like I know exactly what you mean where you're listening to a song and it's just really minimal and you hear the one thing and like you can just quite literally hear add this, and all of a sudden it's like this whole different thing, but you could hear them add it all together and now it's like, but and then most, not maybe not most, but a lot of the electronic music I do, then they'll do that where they break it back down and show you again that like this was all,
Mhm.
it's kind of like building this thing up and then breaking it back down and showing you, like it was just this all along type thing, which is such a beautiful and inspiring motif, I guess, for creating art as well. Do you have any favorite musicians or anything? Like, can you drop some names, or would it be so obscure? Or?
No, yeah, I can. Just like I have probably 200 gigabyte iTunes collection. It's like maniacally maintained. So it's
So do you? Oh, it is maintained. I was gonna ask if you just like randomize it or anything, because so like I'll just say this for my, like, to maybe make it easier for you, is that when I'm going into my studio practice, depending on what I'm about to make, I put on a certain thing. And it first starts with, do I need to listen to electronic music or an instrument music? And then from there, it's like, is it rock or is it metal? And then if it's electronic, it's like, okay, is this dark dub house, or is the kind of stuff I'm trying to make more like ambient nature vibes, or are we like more hackers trance style? You know what I mean? So like I'm actually trying to curate the music and I'm wondering, do you do that same thing? And then do you have some go-tos?
No, I would say most of the time I just listen randomly to like what
Hmm.
I still have not listened to, because I try to kind of keep up with new releases and so
Yeah,
on. So
me too.
do those and listen to them. Sometimes I really want like a specific mood, so I just go with it and try to select. But most of the time, I just will just pick an album and listen to the full album. I like also to kind of listen to the progression the artist wants to make and the story they want to kind
Same.
of tell with the full album. Um, but yeah, other than that, it's let's say a companion to my life, but in a almost kind of natural and uh, easy way.
Yeah, I love that you listen to albums. That's so rare, and like most people don't anymore. And also, the entire music industry is switching to this whole like singles only, releasing two
I
tracks at a
hate it.
time. I hate it so fucking much, dude. Like, I actually, this is such a side topic, but I fucking like, even I barely use Spotify anymore for that reason. They're always just showing me singles, and it's like I want albums. And I've actually transitioned to almost solely in my studio listening to vinyl, like records at a time, where I'm just like, because I really don't like that transition of only giving you like one little bit at a time. So I'm with you on that, and that's very cool to hear. But with electronic music too, especially, like, you really want that longer play, and when you get like that full story, I mean, an electronic album that's a couple hours long, to me,
Yeah.
wow, that's awesome, because you put that on and like you're set for a while, because I want to
Yes.
get, once I'm in that mindset too, you don't want to get jolted out of it. Are you like that?
No, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like usually I sometimes when I release looking for a specific mood or I find an album that I like, I just listen to the full discography of the same artist to kind of
Yeah.
get into and
Me too. I think this is a commonality with artists, that we're like just kind of crazy like that. We're like, we have to stay in this
yes.
zone because that's working for me in this creativeness. So that's great, man. And I know we'll have a playlist from you. I don't know if they asked you for tracks yet, but we always
No,
do a
yeah,
playlist. So I'm looking.
it's really interesting because it's definitely some of my favorite songs, but also I try to build a little journey with the different songs, and I'm jumping a bit from genre to genre, but yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. You say you keep up with music too. How do you keep up with music? How, like, what is your, like, for me, because I asked that because for me, I have like weekly routine of things, I go to these websites, and then
Yeah,
I go to a record store and stuff. And so like, do you keep up in that way?
I wish to, but I have no longer the time to keep up with it. So it's more like
Yeah, it's fair.
but so usually it was kind of weekly. I was looking forward to my weekly playlist from
Yeah.
the algorithm to kind of find what I liked and then dive deeper, reading blogs. I think I started like being so into music when I was a teenager, and there was this full blog house movement. It was huge, and you had like I don't know, 20 blogs that each week they will have like very niche artists, and I spent way more time than I have should into that. Nowadays, probably it's more once per month. I just open Pitchfork. I guess it's one of the greatest comprehensive kind of places where to go find music and keep up with everything. But yeah, I kind of miss having time, and when I'm like kind of overwhelmed by everything, I say, okay, I will just take an afternoon and search for things and enjoy and sit back, relax a bit.
Very similar in that way too, where it's like I use it as like a way of detaching or relaxing, or like a hobby where it's like, okay, I'm saying I can't work anymore, my brain's gonna explode.
Yes.
I'm just gonna go and surf for like new music and whatever. Have you ever heard of the website AOTY.com? It stands for Album of the Year, AOTY. I'm just bringing it up for you because it's a great aggregator. It's like it's a little dense, but it's a great aggregator, and it has new releases like every new release for every week. And then you can click on it and it aggregates the scores from a lot of different review sites. So yeah, just putting it out there, and it will say like experimental electronic underneath it. It's a great way to find music, and it goes a little deeper than throw that out there for you. Great, man. Well, this was a really awesome conversation. Finding out that a generative artist is, you know, it has a lot of the same exact processes that studio artists do, and a lot of the same ways of thinking about it and everything. And I love this community of that's surrounding the Web3 and everything, because for this reason of like bringing an artist like me and you together for these kind of conversations and finding that middle ground and really starting to understand, because before this I didn't understand the middle ground as much. And maybe years ago, I would have even been like, generative art, that's bullshit, fuck that, or something, you know, like just being honest that I, you know, but after having these kind of conversations, like, and being opened up to it, like, yeah, I have a new appreciation for it. And I purposely haven't dived into it much more before speaking with you for this reason, so that now when I go and look at a whole bunch, that I have that appreciation for it, and I do know what's going into it. So I do appreciate you on a personal level, and I'm sure, well, at least I hope others who are listening to this feel the same. Do you have any projects that you're about to launch, or anything that you'd like to promote right now coming up?
I have quite a lot of things going on, but not yet final. I would say it's more like building up for the rest of the year. But I will definitely have another project coming to Artblocks probably in a couple of months. I'm looking into FXH. So if you're listening probably to this, drop me your Tesla's address. I might have some for you when I launch that.
Awesome.
And then
Are you doing anything for NFT NYC? Are you part of any shows or panels?
I was selected to be part of the Times Square display, so we will be seeing a piece. I actually submitted it before our interview. So
awesome! How exciting!
Yeah, it's kind of a dream coming true.
Yeah, that's nuts, man.
Times Square, you're like, oh wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And, yeah, there's something.
I was at NFT NYC last year, and I wasn't part of. Well, I was in some little things, but not the Times Square thing. But I went to Times Square and I saw it, and it's quite an yeah. You're gonna be impressed. It's I'm happy for you, man. That's gonna be a really cool sensation of seeing your work up there. That's really cool. Congratulations. And how can people find you online?
I guess Twitter. I'm not that active as I should be, but it's the place where I usually post my updates, and my website.
And what is your handle on Twitter? Is it just Stefano Contiero, or is there? Great. Well, awesome. Thanks again for your time in this conversation, and for teaching me about generative art and the life of a generative artist. I look forward to seeing the mint, because that hasn't happened yet. We're pre-recording this, but by the time this is out, you'll have minted in the vault. So everybody go to fakewhale.xyz and check out Stefano's mint into the FakeWhale vault. And yeah, stay tuned for everything else. Thank you so much for your time, Con.
Likewise, thank you so much. It was absolutely a pleasure.